So, in many industries, there is this tension between standardization and creativity. You know, one represents consistency and alignment and clarity, and the other, well, creativity is often seen as a challenge to this. People want you to be innovative, but also not to rock the boat. They want to be forward thinking, but then again, there's this safety in doing things the way they were always done. So, how can you achieve a balance between these two things? Well, I'm keen to find out. Hello and welcome to Creativity Uncovered. My name is Avi Gatling and I'm on a journey to uncover how everyday people find inspiration, get inventive and open their imagination. Basically, I am trying to find out how people find creative solutions and then how they use that at home, work, play, and everything in between. And the goal for this podcast is that by the end of it, you'll be armed with a whole suite of tried and tested ways to summon creativity the next time that you need it. My guest today, he's got long hair, he's got tattoos, and last time I saw him, he was actually wearing a kilt. That's right, you guessed it. I'm speaking to a financial advisor today. I'd like to welcome Nathan Fradley to the podcast. Hello.
Bonjour. How you going, Abby?
Very good, very good. Thank you for joining me. I wanted to, actually last time I saw you, I said, I want to get you on the podcast. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I want you on the podcast. Because you're always doing interesting things. And, we met online a while ago. We were working together. Only just met you in real life just a couple of months ago. And so I've just been seeing bits and pieces of what you've been doing with your career, and it kind of sticks out to me, but I don't know a lot about you. So I'm very keen for this chat today. So from what I see online, you kind of don't exactly fit the mold of what a financial advisor, air quotes, financial advisor, is like. Like, you're not really what most people expect. It's quite a serious business. There's very certain expectations and certainly a set career path, I guess. But you're kind of a rule breaker and creating your own path. So I'm keen to start with, what was it about financial advice that attracted you into that? And what is it like being authentically you in this type of industry?
If we go back to getting into advice in the first place, I studying marketing and finance at uni. Actually went in to do accounting, realized that wasn't me, switched to finance and economics and marketing and sort of finished on that basis. And I had two subject conveners that were helping me out quite a bit. Or I was working with them. One was he was a former bond trader, institutional guy, big academic. The other one was corporate finance, had done some financial advice at some stage as well, apparently, and a bit more of a people person. Very different sort of ends of the spectrum. And the corporate finance guy was like, Nathan, you've done the financial advice subject. You're a people person, go do this. The academic guy was like, hey, I've got you a placement, scholarship-based honours program, paid, doing the Fibonacci sequence on the Singapore Stock Exchange for this niche boutique investment bank. I'm like, cool, that sounds exciting. But I really had to think about, is it me? And I think I'm not a dumb person by any means, but I'm not an academic person, I don't think. And yeah, that people person side of it was what pulled me into it in the first place.
Wow. So not the Fibonacci. You weren't.
Yeah, look, I'm still curious about what that was all about and wouldn't mind going back and looking at it. But it's, I think the nature of an honours program, and how intense it was going to be and how niche and specific versus, when I started in financial advice, I worked for a company and, phone sales. And then I was an advisor within 4 months. So something about that direction just pulled me straight into it. So I was youngest appointed at AR in the country, I'm pretty sure, when I was appointed. At 21, I was giving retirement advice to people. And
Wow.
yeah, and I kind of just fell into it. And I was the wild card hire at the bank. That's what they told me afterwards. That it was like, this guy's been a personal trainer for a while. He's run his own business. He's got a lot of personality. We think he could be great. Let's give him a crack. And yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, did you have a vision of what you thought financial advice was going to be like? I mean, you said people person that swayed you more to actually practicing in financial advice, but what does that mean exactly?
yeah, I actually don't remember. I'll be honest with you. Like I've thought about this, like when I've talked to university programs and that kind of stuff, or talked to up and comers, and like what it was that attracted me to it, and it was simply that it was all of my friends were tradies, give or take one or two, middle class, outer suburbs. There wasn't anyone who was high end corporate in my world at all. So it felt probably more familiar to be sitting at someone's kitchen table talking about their money versus 9 zeros on the back of a big number on a spreadsheet. But yeah, apart from that, I'm not actually sure why. I just kind of, I'm gonna say, fell into it. Sometimes the universe speaks and you just listen, and that's pretty much what I did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Like you accept the opportunity and just kind of see where it takes you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so, how far into your career? I'm expecting that, like, as a new financial advisor, especially if you're working in corporate, there's a set way of doing things. You go into it, there's this very set path. How far into your career did you go, okay, this is not quite right for me? Or did you have a feeling that this is not quite right for me? I need to do things my own way?
It's interesting when I started, commissions were a big thing still, a lot of percentage based fees, very few people did flat fees. And my first boss and early mentor and one of his friends who was another mentor early on were both like, no, this is how you do advice. So this idea of values-based advice and talking to the person about their life, we were quite restricted in what we could do. We had restricted products because we could only do the bank's items, but 90% of our time was spent talking about them and their life and their actual problem. And then we just, put them in a super fund with some insurance. Rightly or wrongly, that was how we did it at the time. But the point was we still helped them in their way. And so I think early on I was set up for success in this way because I was shown straight away that, hey, firstly, it sat well with me to do it that way. Secondly, the flat fee thing sat well. And thirdly, you can do it and be really successful. And then I moved into a team, like once I got sort of properly promoted out of the junior role, and they were the like fastest growing team in the country. They were kicking butts, and I was like, "Yeah, I've made it. I'm in the team. These guys, they're awesome. They're growing these businesses. They're great advisors." And like within the first week, they're like, "Why are you doing flat fees? You should be charging percentage because when they contribute, your money goes up." And I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't do anything." And that was the first inkling. But I was like, okay, like these guys went to the same gym. They were in their late 30s, early 40s at the time, and they were still talking about, which high school people went to. They all sat within this certain demographic that was not me. And I started conforming a little bit more and a little bit more. And it was interesting that by doing that, what happened is this weird, like, just strange things started happening. So randomly, me trying to be this clean cut, corporate guy, I went and got a pet turtle because that's what you do, 100-year commitment. I started studying a postgrad in astronomy because I
Oh,
had to, like, I felt this need to not conform. Like, and I only realized that in hindsight of like when I tried to be too normal, for want of a better term, I found my way, I found myself breaking out in other ways. So that was something I figured out very quickly, that when I started being more myself again, I was happier and I stopped doing weirder things because I could do it my own way.
astronomy and a turtle. Like,
Yeah.
are those two related or no?
I mean, they were sciences, I guess, but like that turtle, he's almost 15 now. I've had him
Oh
for a
my
while. Yeah, he lives with my parents. They
God.
take care of him like a grandchildren they don't have. So
I find that really interesting because uh, when I get into my career and I sort of went on this career pathway similar to you, the next thing was coming and I was just sort of on this treadmill, going where the opportunities came rather than choosing my path.
mm,
And yeah, I got to the point where I was like trying to find all this, happiness and creativity outside my role, rather than going, actually, why am I spending so much time in this role that isn't fulfilling me creatively?
mm,
So I'm having to seek it elsewhere. So
in a creative industry. Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, then I ended up moving back into this sort of space again, but I was working for the government and all these
Oh, right.
things, big organizations where you're a small cog and you can't make a huge amount of difference.
Mm.
Uh, so I guess like that sort of sounds like where you're at in your career here. You're trying to study astronomy, get yourself a turtle. When did you realize that it was kind of like this dissonance between who you were and where you were being forced to go in your career?
It's interesting. I don't think I was ever forced. I think I felt like I had to do it because the team never got me to join their gym. Like my nickname was Turtle. Like it was just like one day I was like, oh, what did you do on the weekend? Oh, I got a turtle, and they just lost it. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. And I remember chatting to another friend in the game at the time, and I said, "Do you think I'm a weirdo?" And he goes, I'd say you're endearing. And it stuck with me forever. Like, I think maybe I tried to put myself in that box. No one was trying to put me in that box. And I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to express myself as I am. And there's times where I've tried not to. But I think, yeah, maybe because I'm endearing, or maybe because just despite myself, I'm capable, I'm able to do it my own way. I think that's probably closer to the truth than, being forced by the corporate machine.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's such a funny thing to look back on and go, like, why was I trying to be more like everyone else when I was happy and not?
Yes. Yeah. So so was that making it harder for you in your career that you're putting this pressure on yourself to kind of conform?
I think it was just a learning process. I
Mm.
think, sometimes you try things out, and I think I wanted to grow and I wanted to do really well and I wanted to build up this business and build up this book. And then around that time I discovered that I couldn't stay at the bank anymore. And so I kept working on what I needed to work on, and got promoted to a senior advisor and took that opportunity. But I was, planning on upskilling and starting my own thing, and that's the direction I had to go. That there was a capacity constraint in there's creativity for beauty's sake, and then there's creativity for doing the right thing. And I felt like I couldn't do the right thing and remain at the bank, so I had to go out and do it my own way.
Okay. So is this where you picked up the ESG side of things? Is that what you mean by doing the right thing?
No, no, just that the way that financial advice was done, I think the percentage fees, only being able to use the one bank's products, little things like that, it didn't sit well with me. Sitting in front of a client, knowing that I was saying I was putting him in the best possible solution, but I was so limited in my options to do so. Um, the ESG thing, interestingly, has always been there. I've been using, ethical investments and responsible investments. When I was at NAB, we actually had one option that we could use. So I used them for a very, very long time. There wasn't a lot of options until more recently. And that just sort of came about as I think, like people like people. And when you've got interests or fears that are similar to others, they will gravitate towards you. And I think the kind of people who sought advice from me and the way I did it, I don't think I ever chose my demographic. I think they chose me. They had a similar concern or a similar passion that I did in those areas. So it just increased the demand. And I found myself all of a sudden being, you know, in that space quite on the forefront of things.
Yeah, I think that's nice. It's because you can marry your own personal interests and your willingness to make a difference in the future. Obviously, fear-based
Mm.
initially, but and other people are seeking that out as well. So you can actually still focus on it, and it can be part of your career. I think that's cool. You were able to marry those two things up.
Yeah, I think and particularly in that area of things, I think if you're able to make a difference, even small differences to people, it does allay some of your own concerns because you can make a difference. I think that's always the challenge when those such large existential issues appear and you feel powerless, but you're empowering people, and by doing that, you're making a difference. So it was quite rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned creativity before. Like, where do you think the creativity comes into financial advice?
Again, I think there's creativity in a beauty sense, although there's some beauty in financial advice. But I think when you're making music or you're painting or you're drawing or you're writing or you're speaking, you're speaking to an audience, or you're trying to appeal to a certain person. You're trying to elicit an emotion or an outcome. Financial advice does that. And this sounds really, really corny, but even the straightest guys in financial advice that I know, look, it's a giant problem to be solved. Where financial advice falls down is when the solution for every single person who walks in the door is exactly the same and the way it's delivered is exactly the same. But I think the delivery of that advice, you can give fairly similar advice to a demographic of people and it'd be the right advice. But the way you deliver it to each individual changes. And that's a communication, that's art and communication. And I think financial advisors are uniquely placed to do that. The people who are attracted to the area of advice versus say other areas of corporate finance, they are caring people. They have this unique clash of you know, wanting to be that person. You know, there is a level of ego that we want to be the helper, we want to be the person people turn to, but also genuinely wanting to help, not just wanting to look like that person. And then we have this underlying, you know, technical aspect, the maths bit that people associate with this. But most financial advisors I know, and all the great ones, are hugely creative, hugely empathetic people that want to connect in every single interaction.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with you in the fact that like problem solving is definitely a creative act, and it sounds like you get the opportunities to do that on a daily basis with the work that you're doing.
Mm.
But I also know that there are so many rules and regulations in financial advice, and there is this common perception that rules stifle or restrict creativity. So how can you navigate that to still be creative and unique and innovative in the way that you provide advice?
If you understand the rules, then you can do something that extends outside of them. Like if you know that, you know, a piece of music is in 4/4 and no one's ever written a 5/4 piece of music ever, by you needed to know that 4/4 existed to do 5/4. I think if you understand how things actually work, there's a difference between the rules that are legislatively in place, the regs and legs, and the what is taken as the status quo. And I think that's where the power is. So much of what we do in financial advice, we do it because it's the way it's been done. We have to do it that way. But that's what they say. We can't do that. You know, like an example of that was last year, there's this big uproar about the regulator came out and said you should be talking about performance. And all these advisors went, we're not allowed to talk about performance of investments. And it literally says in our regulation that it's one of the most important considerations. It doesn't say anywhere you can't do that. And yet somehow we took it as fact. You know, we give these enormous documents, these 100-page documents that the regulation says should be clear and concise. It says 47 times the word clear and 27 times the word concise. I counted them. And it doesn't say the word written once. So you could provide that advice, you know, in interpretive dance if you wanted to, providing someone else could understand what you were doing. But if it met the client, if the client understood it through storytelling, through diagrams, through pictures, through video, through and they were fully informed through all the steps that you should be considering, there's no prescription from the regulators. So I think there's a difference between what we expect the rules to be or what the status quo is and what the rules actually are. And that's where creativity can thrive.
Yes. That's such a it's such a dangerous game to play, isn't it? Where you are just sort of taking what someone has said to you and just taking it as fact and as gospel and you just act on that. It sounds like you have to dig deeper and you have to go to the source actually to find out what the true rules and regulations are around what you have to do.
Absolutely.
And but like in your workplaces, you'll find in that there's this sort of narrative and people just accepting that. Is that right?
Yeah. There's this common held belief, and no one knows where it comes from, that if you put a tea towel over your shoulder and chop an onion, you're not going to cry. And it's like, what's that based on? Where's that come from? And yet somehow it permeates through all. There's 15,000 of us, and for some reason we all know the same, you know, story, but we don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not real.
Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating actually.
Yeah. These like sort of unwritten rules, the spoken law, I suppose. It just gets handed down from advisor to advisor.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned challenging the status quo. And that's definitely what I think of you all the stuff that I've seen of you. But you've released your own podcast called Challenging the Standard. And tell me about that, because that is all about challenging the status quo. Like, how did that come about?
That was a suggestion of mine to in a group chat to two good friends, Jordan Barker and Michael Miller, a few years ago. They released the code of ethics, and the last code was raising the standard of advice, which was standard 12. And I said we should call it standard 12. And the boys were like, no, 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 don't have time, don't have time. And then one day Jordan came back to me and said, hey, I want to do this. And I think it'd be really fun. And Michael was still like, nah, I'm out. So Jordan and I picked it up, and we realized that standard 12 didn't mean anything. So we had to challenge the standard. So it became it was raising the bar. It was telling you that's where it sort of was born out of. But like most things that I do, and I think I said this to you when you said, oh, do you want to come on a podcast and talk about creativity? And I said, I'm not creative. The universe just pours ideas into the back of my head, and they come out of my mouth. And that's what it feels like. It's like, hey, my brain's like, you thought about this? I'm like, yeah, cool, that sounds good. Let's go do that. And that's what I do.
Vessel.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just a vessel for the universe. I am merely a conduit. I don't come up with things myself. Yeah, that's what it feels like, at least.
Because I was going to ask, like, what is it in you that is wanting to kind of rattle a few cages, challenge the status quo? But is it purely that you are getting these ideas from somewhere and you just have to act on it? Or is there something innate in you that's kind of going, this is important to me, I need to do this?
I mean, I often joke that potentially as a child I made a deal with some fae or devil, and I'm just doing their will. But it's probably more likely that I just have this innate value of fairness, and that applies when working with clients. And you look at my journey and how I've gotten to where I am in my business, the way I approach advice. But it also applies in looking across this industry of people who are doing things way harder than they should be doing it. These people who genuinely care and want to help and want to do the best, but they are so bogged down in perceived molasses and getting in their own way. And there's absolutely some barriers, right? There's definitely some problems there. But the solutions, I often look at it and say, like, our house is on fire, and we're looking down the street and everyone's house is on fire, and we've got a hose in our hand, and we're like, oh, I wish someone would invent some way to put water onto this fire. So we have the tools right now. And I look at that, and I look at, pain I've gone through being self-employed and being overworked and, burnout and all that kind of fun stuff. And I don't want others to go through that. You see that pain and you want to take it away, because these people are trying to do the right thing for people. They're trying to improve society in their way, in improving financial literacy and financial positions. And you want to take that away. So there's definitely that aspect to it, that I want people to be able to do it. And I think, if I look at some of the other initiatives I was doing around the time, I was fairly active on XY Now Ensemble, which is a forum for financial advisors. I was doing stuff with different small groups of people. I think this was a way to say, okay, Nathan, this can be your project to help the financial advice profession, but this is your only project. Now spend the rest of your time on your actual job. Instead of constantly distracting yourself with little things that you could be doing. So it kind of became the structure around that need of fairness. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Focus, Nathan. We need to just do two things, not 1,000 things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing, is that you became a financial advisor so you can help people, but now you've, launched this podcast so you can help financial advisors, so then they can help people.
Absolutely.
Better. So, yeah.
It's exactly right. If you want to summarize it into a single sentence, for sure.
A sound bite, we need one.
Yeah, perfect.
So, like, is the goal for the podcast to inspire other financial advisors just to think a little bit differently about it? Or are you hoping to change the industry from a regulatory perspective? Or, like, what is your goal for that?
There is a lot of people who've worked in organizations their whole career who have no idea how the rest of the profession works. And as far as they're concerned, this is how it's done and you can't change it. And the amount of messages we've had from advisors being like, I didn't know this was possible. I was just told you couldn't do it. Because they didn't know where to look. They didn't know to read the regulations or how that would apply, or the reg said this, but, ASIC have said this, or AFCA have said this. And it's like, ASIC and AFCA have never said either of those things, and they don't care about you. You're the one piece in the giant puzzle. There's we've already seen enough people go, I didn't know that was possible. So it's kind of for the people at the back of the room with this innate feeling in their gut going, something doesn't feel right here. I feel like I could do this better, but don't know what to do next. Not everyone has the sheer audacity that I do, where you just go, I'm just going to do it. Let's see what happens. Let's jump in the water with the sharks. I think that's the aim, is that if we can get everyone else to start doing it en masse, then the collective view will shift. Even if we take what's that methodology called, where you take a more extreme view, it pushes the center across, so the outcome becomes more moderate because you were so extreme. Even if we can move that along a little bit, I think that would be really powerful. But it's about empowering advisors. It's resulted in a bunch of advisors going out of their own, to be honest. We've caused probably some problems. It's like, whenever we get an email from someone's personal email address, you're john.smith@gmail, you're like, oh, I know what this is about.
Yeah.
But that's what it's doing. People are going, I'm something doesn't feel right about this job, and I'm willing to take this on myself and do something about it. And that's super powerful, because then they'll inspire someone else to do the same thing. And then they'll inspire someone who's in a business to go, hey, other businesses are doing it this way. I'm not leaving. I like it here, but we could be doing it better. And then overall, I think that becomes infectious.
Yes, I think that's really good because, obviously, if you're working for these big companies, they do a lot of work around training and best practice and all this sort of stuff. There's this community within the organization that can all help each other. But when you start to go out on your own, I mean, I certainly find this with running my own business, is that you have to actively go out and seek your peers and seek new information and people who are trying new things and kicking butt in the industry. But quite often it's hard to find that. So I think that this podcast sounds like a really great resource for people who are having those questions but just don't quite know where to go next.
Yeah, it's been, and also it's a lot of fun. Like, I don't care if 4 people listened. I mean, the running joke is there's 7 listeners, and they're all my mum with different Spotify accounts. And we refuse to take sponsorship, and that's become a bit of a bit. But at the conference, the financial advice conference that we met in person at, we hosted we hosted a ticketed event because so many people said they want to have a drink, and we had to prepay to have the venue. And more people came to our drinks than any of the free drinks nights provided by the other product providers. And that was just horrifying. Like, we had I think we worked out in the end, it was about 47 people came by throughout the night to have a drink with us. And it was wild. Just from 2 blokes, yapping on a podcast. It's beyond me how that happens.
You've obviously tapped into something that is really resonating with people. So that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. And when you've got, like, we had the regulators in the place with 1 or 2 product providers and a bunch of advisors all together in the same place, that's a pretty cool environment to be in. It was really open, friendly, and fun, which is cool, because that's what it should be like.
Yes. Yeah, that's cool. So, I mean, you're going around and you're sort of pushing the boat out in a few different ways in the industry. Is this an approach that you also take in outside of work? Like, are you kind of like this in your everyday life as well?
I've been known to take up hobbies and then leave them alone very, very quickly. I have no formal diagnosis on whether or not that is neurodivergence or not at this point in time, but I do like trying different things. I do. It's a common joke amongst Amelia and I. My wife, she says, "I don't care what you do, just pick something." Because I'll be like, "Hey, I had this idea," and she'll be like, "What is it now?" And we've got another business, which is an ethical investing app, which I still remember it. I hope this is my last memory ever. I remember getting into bed and I put my head on the pillow and I breathed out, and Amelia said, "What is it?" And I said, "So I've had an idea." And she's like, "Okay." And she entertains it. And I explained to her, "Hey, there's this app, it's brand new in the world, we can get started at the ground zero. This is what we're going to do." And she was like, "Okay, go." And that changed our life at that moment. So yeah, I think it's just audacity combined with maybe a little bit of naivety, and I just give it a crack, see what happens. And generally, I find I can swim, and the more I keep reinforcing that theory, eventually I guess I'll drown. But it hasn't happened yet. So
It's like leaning into your curiosity. I think that's important.
100%, 100%. It's the idea that, I mean, even today's podcast, like, I'm not a big preparer. So I lean to be authentic, because if you never tell a lie, you don't have to remember anything. And I have a terrible memory. So I just always myself, which makes it easier. Um, you know, I act on the fly a lot, which means I get better at doing that. Yes, I prepare for certain things. Yes, I read up and I research and all that sort of stuff. But I'll never go on a podcast with scripted things to say. I will. I'll do my due diligence, but I won't. Yeah, I like to fly a little bit more free. I think that works for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I definitely think that you can tell with podcasts where people have got the questions ahead of time, they've kind of pre-rehearsed their answers. And, you might still get value out of it, but there's like that authenticity that you mentioned that can sometimes be lacking.
Yeah, I mean, so like I always say about creativity, creativity is the process. Oh no, I just sorry.
I was keen to hear what that is.
No, I didn't have the definition up on my screen. I just had the word Zoom on my screen at this point in time. So, yeah, it's a lot easier in my view, and I also recognize I'm extremely lucky to have that unbound confidence, and I can see where that comes from, be it societal things, be it practice, and be it class things as well. I definitely don't take any of it for granted.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I definitely think that, everything I've heard about you today kind of confirms I was seeing online is that you're someone who sees opportunity, seizes them, leads with curiosity, and just, as you said, just jump in and hope you can swim. But it seems to be working out well. So congratulations.
Thank you. You just reminded me when I was at uni, I did a work-based learning year. It's like you get paid a scholarship to go and work full time. And I worked in a marketing role. And I remember my job interview, I stepped in there and they said, "Oh, would you be able to make this pamphlet?" And I'd done a bit of Photoshop before, mainly, just like stupid memes or, Photoshopping cars, because apparently I was into cars at the time. That faded, luckily. And I was like, "Yeah, I could make that." And they're like, "Oh, how long would it take?" I was like, "Probably an hour." I'm like, "Really? This would take our current guy like 4 hours." So I was like, "No, I could do it in an hour." And I went and I taught myself how to do Photoshop when I started the job. Yeah, granted, it did take me an hour to the fly. It definitely should have taken 4 hours. I was on the money, but I got better and better at it because I was in it, because I had the opportunity to practice live versus trying to over prepare and undersell what I could achieve. I think is probably the key there.
Yes, yes. So, if someone was sort of curious about, trying to lean into that type of thing, like what would your advice be? Because it's obviously very scary just to, jump in that like that.
I mean, everyone's brain's different. So, and mine definitely is, which, gives me a certain skill set. But I think that the first one is expectations. And I say this is also my own enemy. Often I'll expect I can do something faster or better, um, or multiple things within a day, which would be otherwise impossible, time blindness. But I think you've got to recognize that sometimes the best idea in the world comes to you immediately, and sometimes it won't come to you for the next month. And so the advantage of having a few things on the go means I can just work on what's in front of me at the time and wait for that bit of spark of brilliance. If I only had one thing and I hadn't had any spark of brilliance, I'm stuck for a really long time, or I'm churning out something that I'm not happy with. I'm not being creative, I'm just producing. And I think that's a really key. You've got to be patient with creativity. It will present itself when you're ready. So if you've got that mindset around it, then I think that's the best place to start. And then the other one is just backing yourself. I think, yeah, it's really, really common in women versus men. Around men will just have a crack, women will over prepare. Yeah, and talking to people in like universities around and job hiring and my own hiring and historically, when you look at things and go, hey, um, there's all these women here who've got master's degrees and then there's guys who've just like, I don't even have a degree in finance. I just thought I'd have a crack at this job. You just see that. And so if you're finding yourself in that situation, just be like a dude, just have a crack. Because somewhere out there is an underqualified man getting the job that you were having a go for, so you might as well have a go. I think that confidence has got to come from somewhere, and sometimes a little bit of audacity can do us all a favor.
Well, you've heard it here, folks. Some great advice there. Well, thank you, Nathan. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and chatting to me today. I there's a lot to take away from this, and I I think people are going to be very interested to tune in.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone who's actually listened to this episode of Creativity Uncovered. Um, If that's has inspired you, please do get in touch. I'm always keen to hear about, what these conversations spark in your own life and how it's helped you summon your own creativity. So, until next time, take care. If you've made it this far, a huge thank you for your support and tuning into today's episode. Creativity Uncovered has been lovingly recorded on the land of the Cubby Cubby people, and we pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. This podcast has been produced by my amazing team here at Crisp Communications, and the music you just heard was composed by James Gatling. If you liked this episode, please do share it around and help us on our mission to unlock more creativity in this world. You can also hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episode releases.